Okay, today we are going to look at the different regions of Argentina, what the landscapes look like, and some of the weird animals that inhabit these spaces. Argentina is one of the biggest countries in the world. Actually, in fact, it's eighth behind India. And so there's just a lot of diversity there, like the United States. In fact, every landscape that you can find in the United States, you can also find in Argentina. Well, almost every landscape. The difference is down there, when you go south, it actually gets colder. And when you go north, it gets warmer. So the people in the southern part of the country actually vacation in the north for the winter. Now let's take a look and compare the size of Argentina by pulling it over the United States. Holy cow. Can you look at that? You can see that the southern part of Argentina would reach the southern tip of Mexico. And the northern border would stretch all the way up to the Canadian border. There's tons of land here. It's mostly north and tall, but still, from east to west, you could cover most of the Great Lakes and reach all the way to somewhere around Pierre, South Dakota. So with such a huge country, the northern part is really warm, and the southern part in the winter can get quite cold. So let's go down to this region called Patagonia. Yes, this is where the clothing brand got its name. This place looks and feels like Alaska in the western part, with its mountains being the longest mountain range in the world, the super tall Andes. But the majority of Patagonia is the desolate open spaces of the east that look like boring and sad big sky country in Montana, with its nothingness sprinkled with oil fields here and there and a couple of weeds. Now, if we go up north a little bit, this dark blue spot, this spot is a lot like where we live. This spot is the breadbasket of Argentina, containing tons and tons of cornfields and soybean fields and pastures and feedlots where they raise cattle. So it really is a lot like where we live, with hot summers and cooler winters. Moving up to this red zone will show us a lot of diversity. So you know that Argentina is cold in the south and warm in the north, right? Well, it's also wetter in the east by the Atlantic Ocean, and it becomes much drier as you move west to the Andes Mountains. Again, very similar to the United States. So, in the hot and wet east, with its swamps and forests, much like the American South, think Georgia and Louisiana. But if we go west, we get very dry, like desert dry. And we also go very, very high up. The Andes, in fact, are the highest mountains outside of Asia. And the Andes are so high here that it is difficult to breathe when you're walking around, and you can possibly get a headache while climbing at this elevation because of elevation sickness. So, we got this cute little map with different graphics to show each region, and let's start our tour out back in Patagonia, the land of the penguins, and the desert, and the glaciers, and the mountains. Here is Mrs. Schley in the west along the Andes Mountains in one of the most beautiful places on Earth, in my opinion. And here am I in one of the many glaciers. This glacier is actually just across the border into Chile, but since both countries share the same mountains, we'll just pretend this picture was taken in Argentina. Oh yeah, and the penguins aren't just in Antarctica. There's tons of them down here. We never saw a wild penguin before, so we thought these guys were amazing. But to the locals, they were kind of normal and not worth even taking a picture of. In fact, our friend from the region thinks that these are not as cool as the penguins in Antarctica, so he calls them pingüinos feos, meaning ugly penguins. But we disagree. There's lots of penguins in parts, and other fun animals like armadillos and llamas. These llamas are all over the place in South America. They're kind of like our deer. You have to look out for them at night while you're driving. Some llamas are wild, and some llamas are owned, like cattle, and we'll get to some pictures of those domesticated llamas later on. Again, this photo was taken in Chile, but it is of a lake so large that it also extends into Argentina as well. This lake took us an entire day of driving, going along its southern edge, to leave from Chile and enter into Argentina. We didn't even leave sight of the lake until sunset. It is fed by glaciers and has some of the most beautiful colored waters I've ever seen. Just check out that blue. It is unreal. As you drop out of the Andes, you come to the open wasteland of Patagonia. But it is not without some inhabitants. Digging for dinosaur fossils is exceptional here, much like in western South Dakota and Wyoming. We drive up the East Coast along the Atlantic to again find places much like the East Coast of the United States with beaches. And this place in particular is fun for hiking because here is a forest growing on pure sand dunes, not dirt. Okay, let's move on to more farm ground. Again, much of this part of Argentina looks a lot like South Dakota. Pastures, cornfields, soybean fields, and cattle. Argentina is known for its cattle and has one of the highest beef consumption per person in the world. In fact, here we go. Look at this truck here. This truck is hauling cattle. And here is a big feedlot where they grow a lot of cattle. When our farmer friends came to visit us in Argentina, they said it looked a lot like home. They also have a lot of animals that are kind of like what we have here, but a little different. Like they have rabbits, but they're kind of a little bit different than rabbits. And they have Mrs. Schley's favorite rodent in the whole world, the humble capybara. These are in more northern parts of Argentina, as well as other parts further north into South America, like Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay. As foreigners, we think these are the coolest things. They weigh up to 150 pounds, and they remind me of huge guinea pigs that hang out in swampy areas and nibble on grass all day. But locals think that they are annoying because they eat up their yards and will hit them with their cars at night. Imagine the damage to your car from a rat the size of a deer. Oh yeah, and their babies are super cute too. As we move north, we get more rain and see more forests. The summer can get pretty hot and humid and uncomfortable like Georgia. We also have new types of animals. Like termite mounds are huge up here. Another animal is this weird raccoon thing. They are pretty curious little guys. One of the biggest waterfalls in the world is called Iguazu Falls. This place is much bigger than Niagara Falls. And right now we are on the Brazilian side. The waterfall separates Argentina from Brazil. So what you are seeing across the river is Argentina. As you go out west, we see Grand Canyon-like rock formations and deserts like we see in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. Yep, cactus, and not a whole lot of wildlife. But this, too, is another good place to find dinosaur fossils. This is the base of the Andes Mountains, and we are very high up on a high plateau, which is a landmass that has a really high elevation but is flat, unlike mountains. The further north we go, the drier and more deserty. These are the ruins of an indigenous people that were a part of the Incan Empire. They made reservoirs for water to harness water needed for irrigation in this dry place. And we see more cactus. As you get farther north, you get even drier and higher. We finally made it to the salt flats. At this elevation, you may get a headache at night while you try to sleep. Not quite altitude sickness, but also not quite comfortable either. Here, they are harvesting salt. That's why we see these little paths here. That's where they pull the salt out. Nothing but salt and high desert for miles and miles and miles. Hey, check out this llama. Those ribbons in her hair tell us that this one has an owner, kind of like brands or tags that we have for cattle here. So, that's our road trip through this large country of Argentina. We didn't see everything, but I hope that this offers you a glimpse into the large variety of locations that this country has to offer. We saw many environments and animals that look familiar to what we have here in the United States, but just a little bit different.